Rejoice. It's one of those words with a re. Whenever there's a re before the term, it means again. So joy again, rejoy. It's one of those words that means, in other words, having joy means I had it, but I lost sight of it. It's like the same words, but recognition, recognition, that I knew something, but I lost sight of what I knew. I lost touch with it. Same way, religion means religare, religament. It means a connection that I'm feeling I've disconnected from in some way. So it's like something that had but lost, or I've lost sight of. So this rejoice, and that's here in the midst of this Advent season. Um, what's the source of this joy? Obviously, we usually, equate joy with happiness. But of course, with happiness, there's an opposite of happiness. Being happy, being sad, right? And that's because happiness, sadness tend to be our our emotions, and emotions are linked to thoughts, and our thoughts can be either or, up or down. Um, so I can be happy, I can be sad, I can be mad, I can be glad. And a lot of that depends on how we're thinking about things. It depends on external circumstances. If certain things are in order as I want them, then I can be happy. But then the things don't always stay in the same way, and there's change. That means I can have those ups and downs. But obviously, we're hearing in the gospel the word rejoice always, St. Paul says. And St. Paul said, rejoice always, always give thanks always. And of course, Paul is speaking, and he's talking about I'm being shipwrecked, I'm being flogged, I'm beaten, I'm thrown in prison, I'm hungry and thirsty and cold, and so he's just talking about, wow, how can he rejoice? How can he give thanks in those types of circumstances? How can we, in the midst of pandemic and all that we in our lives? And of course, what we get at is that joy is not an emotion. Joy is a state of being, which means basically it's rooted in something that's that's always there. It's always present. It's about being present with the mind and the heart of God. That's always there in all times and seasons and circumstances, the ups and downs. And that's the source of that. That's why Isaiah in the first reading, in the midst of exile, rejoice. And St. Paul, rejoice always. That they've connected with something that isn't dependent upon certain things being in a certain way. That's why, once again, it's about reconnecting, rejoicing, remembering, in a sense, something that is there. It's awakening up to something that the Lord is here, the Lord is present, as opposed to, it's something I'm dependent upon, something happening in the future, in some different time and place, because right now isn't sufficient enough. It's lacking something. And that's why I say it's not about getting somewhere, it's about being somewhere. It's opening ourselves up to what is already present. That's revelation, reveiling. It's opening taking the veil off what's already here. And that's the great gift of Advent is waking up to that reality, waking up to that presence of a God who is always present in all times and seasons, and reconnecting to that source, to that life, and that's that gift of what the world cannot give, or the world cannot take away. And when you have that gift, and that's I think the thing that which we all long for and yearn for. It's like, where is it? And we could be often like the prodigal son. It's like I have to go out somewhere in order to find what I'm looking for. I have to go somewhere else. Then he returns and finds it was there all along. And instead of taking 1,000 steps forward, you take one step back. And it's opening our minds and hearts to that. And why is that? It's so often is because we're often living out of our own minds, our own thoughts about things. And it's how to be able to be still and know that I am God. We're like, Martha, Martha, you're anxious and worried and upset about many things. You're preoccupied. You're losing sight of the one. There's one thing that's important. And, like Mary, being present to the Lord, just being still. And when I have that, I have everything. And then to be able to put it together, the active life and the contemplative. And so often, so many of the stories about, the people who, the king is giving a great banquet. There's a banquet of life that's full of abundance. And why do people are not participating in it? It's not because they're bad people. They're busy people. They're preoccupied. They got so many other things that they see as so important. Their minds are rushing around, and they're living out of that anxious, worried mind, as we all do. That becomes our identity, and that's why our what do we have? Our Gospels, where do they take us? They take us out to the desert. You go out to the desert, there's not a lot of stuff there. It's being in a wilderness, being in this empty place, and then all of a sudden, there's a gap there. There's a space into which you can now, where since God can get into you again, you can come to know who you are when you're not attached to this thing and that thing. So often our possessions or our titles or our work or whatever, all those things that we so often over-identify ourselves with. That this is where I'm going to find who I am or what I'm looking for. As they were asking John the Baptist, who are you? Who are you? And are you this? Are you that? Or trying to, that's who you are. And of course, he knows there's the deeper reality to who he is. And it's a lot of times it's when we lose those things, when we're going through the darkness, that we find the light. One of my favorite times is to be able to come into the church at night when it's dark. Everything is dark and you can't see anything, and all you can see, you come into the church when it's dark at night, is you see the little pilot light. You see the sanctuary lamp burning. And it reminds you, even in the midst of how dark things are, that light is always burning. That presence of God is always there. And then rejoice. The light of God, the presence of God, no matter how dark things might be, and how to be rooted in that. And that's that state of being, in relationship. And so that when that's there, rejoice always. And that's what St. Paul can say. That's what Isaiah can speak. John the Baptist. That's why even on the cross of Good Friday, Jesus he has his Father. He has it all. And to be in that place and to rejoice always and to be still and know that I am God. Reawaken ourselves to that reality. But we often in life we're in we call a reactive mode. When we're reacting to things, then the shallow part of us reacts to the shallow part of somebody else or a situation, as opposed to allowing what's deepest in us. In fact, say when you're able to embrace all with love and compassion. Mary gave her yes to be not only to be the mother of the Son of God, but it was to basically saying yes to the life of God at all times and seasons, through the joyful, the sorrowful, the luminous, the glorious mysteries of life, the ups and downs, that she would always be able to embrace and love what is. And you embrace and love what is, even in its imperfections and its shortcomings, and so it's not something, well, I got to force myself to love, and it's more like allowing the love that's already in you to love through you. So when you're not reacting to things, but you're embracing all things with love, with patience, with compassion, with forgiveness, with mercy, then it's no longer that shallow kind of ego self reacting to things but it's the deeper reality of God's allowing God to love through me. And God's loves what's deep, the deepest part of you responds to the deepest part of everything else and everyone else, where the heart and the presence of God is to be found. To see beneath the surface of things to the deepest reality, where the light of God, shines, that I am everywhere. Whatever you do to the least, you do for me, because I am there. And that's what this Advent season is waking to us, that God dwells with his people. He is, the Word becomes flesh, dwells among us. And the holy is to be discovered right where we are. And, as we gather here in church, it should be awakening our awareness to the presence of God when we leave church. That we can see and experience him and love him and serve him and his people and his world. And that's the great gift of this third Sunday of Advent. Rejoice always. Give thanks to God. Rejoice. Recapture. Reawaken yourself to the presence of God that the world cannot give and the world cannot take away. And so that's, whenever we come into the church, it's about, we of course emphasize that the real presence of Christ, that Christ is always present to us. That even when we were sinners, Christ still loved us. And to have that kind of love that is always there, it's always compassionate, it's always, so being in the presence of Christ should reawaken his presence in us so he can continue his life-giving mission and work through his people. And so, as we gather here, to rejoice, to recognize, to remember, and to receive. Basically, receiving is receiving back what you already have, the gifts of God's presence, his abiding love in our lives. And that should be, we reawaken here during this wonderful journey of Advent, allowing Christ to be reborn in the hearts and lives of his people, and so that we can truly make that gift of joy that is truly our own, because as a gift of God, living out of that relationship in all times and season, and allowing the light of God to continue to be enkindled more brightly in our lives and for the life of our world.